G'day guys and welcome back to the weekly VEMA Trader Bitcoin market scan. My name is Rhys and in today's video I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on what Bitcoin is doing at the moment. So we're going to take a look at the chart. I'll see if there is any trades that I like the look of, and if there is I will set those trades up. So what we'll do is we'll head to VEMA Trader and we'll get started. Righto, so here on the weeklies and very zoomed in, it was actually a really positive week for Bitcoin last week. We had a really big bullish engulfing. You can call that a bull hammer because it does have that wick to the downside and then the push up, the close higher up. Bullish engulfing, bull hammer, either way, quite a positive week for Bitcoin last week. You can see that weekly demand level that we've been looking at about 18,500 was beautifully respected, right? A really, really nice touch off that and then a push. So, a positive week for Bitcoin last week for certain. Now, the one thing that I am keeping in mind is there is a huge downtrend that price is approaching. It's not something I've been really paying attention to because we've been a long way from it. We are now starting to get quite close to it. Now, as I always say, right, I am not the biggest trendline fan because they're so subjective. In fact, you can see that I've sort of drawn mine a little bit off. I do usually use the line chart, but you'll notice that if anyone is using log charts or trend lines can just always be drawn so many different ways. So it'll be interesting to see whether price does respect that line if it is to get there. But always keep in mind that trend lines are more subjective, right? There is a lot of different ways you can draw them, which means that not everyone will be seeing them in the same place, which means that not everyone will trade them in the same way. So just something to keep in mind that we are approaching that level. In terms of supply, the next one is still at that 29,000 level. You could kind of draw one like that because we did have a big sell-off, but I wouldn't. It's until we break this level, then that would be what I'd call like a pretty weak weekly supply zone. You'll find daily and 4 hour zones in there to use instead, is kind of how I look at that. Righto, so on the daily, we have now formed a new demand zone, which was at about 19,300. Now that is quite a strong demand zone because we had a really nice buy up straight out of the zone. It broke this level and this level of market structure, which is really good to see. We had a supply zone marked in here that was respected really cleanly at first, right? You can see that close. Price now pushed up and whipped through that, so that is now gone. That doesn't really matter anymore. The next supply is up at about 24,300 in terms of the next daily supply. So we've got a long way to go before we meet that. We're currently rejecting from the 50 fib. Got a bit of a doji, kind of a bear hammer situation, but there's still 18 hours until this daily candle closes. So can't really make a call on what the candlestick is going to be until that close comes, because price could still push up and we'd get some sort of another bullish engulfing, bull hammer kind of formation. Price could reject, price could close a doji. There's just too much uncertainty until that actually closes. But right now we are rejecting from the 50. So to the upside, the levels that I'm watching are the 22,500 EQ and the 61.8. Especially if we do sort of push, say we range for the week, when they start to coincide with this trend line, that's a really, really good area, or could be a really, really good area to get into a short. I probably won't be taking one from there necessarily because I'd have to have my stop above the 78.6 and then that wick I'd kind of want to have above that, and I'm just going to get a really bad risk to reward. So there's nothing really that interests me there when I'm looking at that right now, but that's kind of my thinking on the daily. Righto, so now we get down to the 4 hour, and I have drawn fibs on, but keep in mind that these fibs are only valid if price continues to reject from here, right? We have seen a pretty solid rejection in the last candle, but if price continues to head up, then these fibs will be invalidated. So while that's the top, these are valid fibs. As soon as that breaks, these fibs are invalid. In terms of to the downside, we have a demand zone that we formed just here at about 21,300. Excuse me. I'm not interested in taking longs off that demand zone because to me it feels like buying the top, right? Price has moved a long way without really any retracement. I would much rather get into a trade from sort of 50, 61.8 area, which is something that I always do. They interest me a lot more than sort of the 23.6 and the 38.2. I just much prefer trading from there. I've had a much higher success rate from those two levels. When I look at this, the 50 fib is really the level that excites me, right? It is matching up beautifully with that 4 hour EQ that we saw before. So that's probably the level that I'm most interested in, that sort of 20,500 level. The 61.8, there is kind of an EQ. I did not know you could I think that double clicked and automatically mapped to something. I'm not 100% sure what. Didn't know you could do that, but anyway. There you go. The 61.8 lines up really nicely with about 20,000, which was pretty significant level previously as well. But the 50 is probably the area that interests me the most when I look at this chart. We do have a demand zone at 19,300, and we do have a demand zone at 18,800 that we formed on the way up. So we have a pivot zone here, and then a bit of a pause zone here, but that pause led to an enormous move. So I'd consider that to be a reasonable zone. To the upside, so we still have that daily EQ, the 61.8 fib that lines up with that. This area here, we've got a supply zone, we've got the negative 27 fib. That's an area that interests me a lot. I think that's a great target. If you're in a long at the moment, that would be a great... I would consider that a great place to take profit if I was in a long at the moment. Am I going to take a short from there? Probably not, to be honest. I don't really like the look of the market right now. It just doesn't feel conducive to my trading, as I like to say. What I'm kind of seeing is a bit of an ascending wedge forming. Now, I wouldn't really call this a 4-hour ascending wedge. Probably more of like a 15-minute one. Yeah, looks a lot more like one on the 15s. So if we... always got a side of that gone. If we get it looking a little bit like that, and then we've had a bit of a move out, but then kind of a close back in, almost a fake out. What that means is there will be divergence on the CCI. So if we come and take a look at the CCI, yeah, you can see textbook divergence, right? We have a higher high on the oscillator here, going to a lower high on the oscillator, coinciding with a higher high on the price action chart, followed by a higher high on the price action. So they're disagreeing, right? The CCI is saying, hey, we're actually losing momentum here. Price is still heading up, but it's losing steam. And I don't know if you guys can hear the wobble board. My old man's just got home and is playing with the dog, I think, and he's doing that, wobbling a tin sheet or something. Hopefully that's not coming up through the mic, but a bit of excitement for the dog at least. So yeah, we've got that ascending wedge, which they typically break to the downside, not every time, but they do typically break to the downside. And that kind of makes me think, I'm watching it basically break out right now, but it makes me think that something like a move down to the 50 or even just to that demand zone is certainly not impossible. In terms of trades, there's really nothing I like to look of. I'm just not liking the look of the market at the moment. I'm just kind of a bit off. I don't want to trade it, basically. When I look at this, I don't see things from like, yeah, that is a clear trade. That is a very clear trade and something that I would take. If there was a zone here, potentially I would, but because it's a 50 and an EQ, nothing that I really want to take directly from that level. So that is it for me, guys. Hopefully you are having a great week. Hopefully you're going to the crypto convention this weekend. If you are, I hope it's a blast. Make sure you go and say hello to the guys at the VEMA booth. They'll be very, very excited to see you guys. Have a great day. Happy trading, and I'll talk to you very soon.